Welcome to Molson Canada, a Vancouver brewery. Congratulations on your new job. Working here can be very rewarding and challenging, but you should always remember that safety is of utmost importance. This program is not intended to be a complete safety orientation, but it serves as a tool to make you aware of health and safety practices in the brewery and to introduce the most common hazards you will encounter. Other parts of your orientation include the completion of online training sessions, job-specific training, and formal classroom training. It is very important to talk to your supervisor about any department or area-specific health and safety issues that are not specifically discussed in the program. You will have to complete a test after this program to ensure you are familiar with the critical information provided. It is important that you fully understand your role and the roles of others who together create a healthy and safe work environment. The key topic areas are health and safety legislation, your joint health and safety committees, emergency procedures, and introduction of brewery-specific hazards that you probably will encounter in your workplace. These hazards include ammonia, CO2, chlorine, caustics, other hazardous chemicals, forklifts, and working at heights. The Occupational Health and Safety Regulations is the main legislation in British Columbia that describes the minimum standards for keeping you and the workplace safe and sets a direction for health and safety practices. The regulations also outlines specific health and safety responsibilities for employees. There are many regulations under the Workers' Compensation Act. Some of these will apply directly to your work and environment. These regulations include confined spaces, de-energization and lockout, fall protection, tools, machinery and equipment, noise, vibration, radiation, and temperature, as well as personal protective clothing and equipment. As an employee, you have 3 important rights described in the regulation: the right to know about health and safety hazards in your workplace, the right to participate in health and safety decision-making, and the right to refuse work that you think is unsafe. As an employee, you also have responsibilities stipulated in the regulation. They include the responsibility to follow the brewery's safe work policies and procedures, the responsibility to participate in health and safety training, a responsibility to use the personal protective equipment provided by your employer, responsibility to immediately report any work-related illness or injuries or unsafe acts or conditions of which you are aware of to your supervisor. Make sure to discuss the brewery rules with your supervisor. The Molson Vancouver Brewery also has legal responsibilities to an employee. They include to provide you with health and safety training related to your work activities, to ensure workplace inspections are carried out, and to identify and correct any unsafe health and safety conditions. Supervisors must supervise your work procedures and activities to ensure safe work procedures are being followed and investigate any work-related accidents or incidents and take appropriate and timely action. The WCB legislation requires the brewery to have a graduated return to work program in place. You have specific responsibilities under this program after you have been injured. Once an accident has happened, it is our legal responsibility to do an investigation to determine the causes so that we can change our management system to prevent similar type accidents from happening in the future. If you are involved with an accident, you might be asked to help with the accident investigation. Keeping our workplace safe is a tough job. Everyone must be aware of their rights, responsibilities, and do their part, and work together as a team to keep our workplace safe. A safe workplace culture develops and grows when employees and managers work in partnership and are accountable for nurturing good health and safety work practices and a safe work environment. The positive health and safety actions that you do are very important in building a safety culture in your organization. By being a role model, you are setting the right example and guiding the way for others. For example, reminding a coworker to wear his personal protective equipment, or cleaning up spills, or moving tripping hazards out of the way all contributes to the safety, feel, and culture of the brewery. Always do the right thing. The foundation of the occupational health and safety regulation and safety culture rests on the internal responsibility system. Everyone in the workplace has a responsibility to work together, cooperatively, to prevent occupational injuries and illnesses. Working safely is contagious. The more it is done at the brewery, the more it becomes the norm. Identifying hazards is one of the most important ways you can contribute to a safe and healthy workplace. We will now look at what is a hazard. A hazard is any condition or practice that may have the potential to harm people or damage equipment, materials, and the environment. No workplace is ever hazard-free. Your first step is to identify as many hazards as possible. Some may be easy to recognize, and others may be less obvious. There are 4 categories of workplace hazards to consider: hazards related to people, equipment, materials, and the work environment. Let's now look at these one by one. The first category of workplace hazards to consider are those related to the people in the workplace. These might include other employees, contractors, clients, visitors, suppliers, or anyone else that you interact with at work. Hazards related to people are often caused by unsafe work practices in daily work interactions. For example, a forklift driver is driving without a seatbelt, or he might be driving recklessly. You will need to remind a driver that he needs to put on a seatbelt and drive in a safe manner. The second category of workplace hazards to examine are those related to the equipment, machinery, tools, and devices you use at work. This equipment may be broken, improperly guarded, in poor repair, or not appropriate for the task you are doing. The third category of workplace hazards are those related to the materials that you might use or come into contact with at work. It is important that materials are properly labeled, that employees know the correct personal protective equipment to wear, and that adequate transport and disposal procedures are in place. For example, a cleaning product that can burn your skin if you don't select and wear the appropriate glove, or a container without a WHMIS label. The fourth category of workplace hazards are those related to the physical buildings and to environmental conditions. This includes the use of space, the ambient temperature, noise, ventilation, lighting, and general housekeeping measures. For example, when there isn't dedicated storage space for a piece of equipment and it must be stored in a hallway or blocking a fire exit. Sometimes these hazards might even be hidden, like a ventilation system that is not working properly. So you should ask your supervisor to investigate it if you suspect this. If you can control the hazard yourself, do so. But if the hazard seems more difficult to control, report it to your supervisor. We also have safety logbooks in various locations that you can use to report hazards that do not require immediate attention. If you see a hazard and do not report it to your supervisor, he cannot solve the problem. So once again, it is your responsibility to report hazards. The OHS regulation requires all workplaces to have a JHSC to monitor the effectiveness of the organization's health and safety program. The members of the Joint Health and Safety Committee act on your behalf to review, inspect, and make recommendations on workplace safety practices to the brewery management to help reduce health and safety risks to our workers. They meet once per month as required by legislation. They're assigned to the Health and Safety Department for 1 week per month to assist in managing the health and safety program. There are HNS and JHSC bulletin boards located in the hallway outside the employee lunchroom and various other locations in the brewery. The first aid room is located in the packaging area, bottle line. To obtain first aid, call 1777 or call 604-841-0657. Or alternatively, hit the first aid horn by the first aid room or bulk caustics area. Emergencies, disasters, and injuries can occur at any time without warning. Being prepared is everyone's responsibility. It is essential to follow the emergency evacuation procedures. You should also be familiar with the location of all emergency equipment, fire extinguishers, emergency eye wash, shower stations, and spill containment kits. It is your responsibility to make sure you are familiar with the brewery's emergency evacuation procedures. This is what the fire bell sounds like. Do not confuse this with other alarms such as fork trucks, CO2 alarms, powerhouse engineer alarms, first aid alarms, or stretch wrapper out of film buzzer. You should view every alarm as the real thing and do not assume that it is just a drill or a false alarm. Only return to your workplace when you are given the instruction by your crisis coordinator or the EH&S manager. Some of the hazards that are most common at the brewery include exposure to hazardous gases, hazardous chemicals, confined space entry, machinery, noise, forklifts, working at heights, and fire. Be sure to fully participate, ask questions, and practice the new skills you will learn in your departmental training. You have to complete your training checklist before you start. Let's look at some of the most prevalent hazardous chemicals. Ammonia is used as a refrigerant here at the brewery. It is mostly found in the brewing department and the powerhouse, utilities. It is a colorless gas with a strong odor. It is toxic and very irritating to the eyes, nose, and throat. You will have to complete the online ammonia awareness training through the Solox website. All known asbestos-containing materials, ACM, in the brewery has been identified. Straight runs of pipe as well as elbows and vessels, walls and ceilings covered with ACM are identified by either Brady or equivalent markings or red paint stencil. Carbon dioxide, or CO2 as commonly referred to, is a colorless, odorless gas produced as a byproduct of the brewing process. This liquid, CO2, is re-evaporated and the gas is used to counter-pressure all of our beer tanks and to carbonate our beer in process. As such, CO2 can be found in most areas of the brewery. The level of exposure to this gas is important in establishing its risk to your health. Please ensure you read and understand the CO2 safety procedures in place at the brewery. As your employer, the brewery has to provide you with the appropriate PPE and train you how to use, store, and clean your PPE. An assessment of the hazards in the brewery was done, and certain jobs and areas have been identified that would require you to wear PPE. Examples of confined spaces at the brewery include fermenting tanks, cellar storage tanks, lauter tun, mash mixer, cereal cooker, brewing kettles, as well as the soaker, pasteurizer, CIP tanks, pits, boiler compartments, and silos. Confined space entries hold specific hazards. The entry process is legally regulated by the OHSR and is only allowed to under permit to ensure your safety. Under no circumstance are you allowed to enter a confined space without an official permit being issued. You are required to be officially trained before you are allowed to enter a confined space. The purpose of the lockout procedures is to control hazards to ensure you're protected from all potentially hazardous energy sources. While performing maintenance on equipment or systems, or any other work, such as cleaning major equipment jams, which would expose you to a risk of injury from the movement of machinery, engulfment, electrocution, burns, or chemical exposure. You are required to be officially trained in lockout procedures before you are allowed to do work requiring lockout. Cutting, grinding, brazing, welding, soldering, thawing pipe, and applying roofing materials with torches are all examples of hot work. These procedures are legally regulated to be done under permit conditions. Under no circumstances are you allowed to do any hot work without a permit being issued for it. There are specific steps to be followed when these procedures are being done. You are required to be officially trained in hot work permit procedures before you are allowed to issue a hot work permit. Keeping your eyes open for tripping and slipping hazards such as a wet or greasy floor, cords, or uneven surfaces, report these to your supervisor immediately and record it in the safety logbook. Never store items around corners or on walkways. This habit creates tripping hazards and is easily preventable. Wear appropriate shoes according to our brewery's personal protective equipment policy. The OHS regulation requires the brewery to ensure that a fall protection system is used whenever work is being done that is higher than 10 feet or where a fall from a lesser height involves an unusual risk of injury. The brewery, therefore, has a fall protection policy and procedures. You are not allowed to work above 10 feet without a fall protection system to protect you from falling. You are required to complete official training before you can use any of the fall protection systems. Workplace violence and aggression are becoming prevalent in the workplace. Part of the problem is that workplace violence tends to be poorly defined and underreported. This makes it difficult for your supervisor to protect you. Workplace violence can take many forms, including physical or sexual assault, pushing or shoving, arguments, anger-provoked incidents, psychological or verbal abuse, harassment, pranks, rumors, and swearing. To properly manage workplace violence, management needs to know about each incident. Make sure you complete your violent occurrence or incident report in the event of violent behavior. The Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, or WHMIS, is in place to protect employees. Under WHMIS, Molson is required to provide education, labels, and material safety data sheets to inform you about the hazards associated with using hazardous chemicals and how to protect yourself. We have an online application that we use to keep our MSDS current. If you require any information on a specific chemical, it can be obtained here. Chemicals of specific note in the brewery are caustics used in the CIP, clean in place process, and chlorine. There are several other hazardous chemicals on site. Please make sure that you do not work with any chemical if you are unaware of the specific health hazards, handling procedures, required PPE, or specific emergency procedures involved. WHMIS training is mandatory and needs to be done annually. You will be required to do the training during your H&S orientation here at the brewery. The training is done online through the Solox website. There are other regulations that also help to protect you from exposure to hazardous chemicals. For example, if you're involved with the shipping, receiving, or handling of dangerous goods, you need to be trained to meet the Transportation of Dangerous Goods regulation requirements. This training is also available online through the Solox website. You might not have given radiation a second thought as a hazard when you walked into the brewery today, but we do have some radiation sources on site. They're located on the packaging lines and in the quality control laboratory. The risk of overexposure to radiation is extremely low, and although the equipment is designed to protect accidental gamma ray leakage during normal use and is inspected annually for any potential leaks, there is still the potential for unforeseen equipment damage. If this is suspected, immediately notify the area supervisor or their EH&S manager and evacuate the area, allowing no one to return to the suspected radiation area. The OHSR requires that no person shall carry out any work or operate any tool and that person has reasonable cause to believe that to do so would create an undue hazard to the health and safety of any person. When such a condition exists, you have to inform your supervisor immediately to investigate the matter. If the issue cannot be resolved, a member of the JHSC must be involved, and if the situation can still not be resolved, a WCB officer shall be called to assist. You can be assigned other temporary work while the unsafe issues are being investigated. The Molson Vancouver Brewery is committed to safe environmental practices. Being environmentally aware ensures a safe working environment for everyone. At the brewery, our commitment to the environment is company policy. Molson breweries are industry leaders in environmental action. Molson consumers return 98% of our bottles and 83% of our cans to the point of sale. They also bring back the cardboard packaging for recycling. That's millions of pounds of glass, aluminum, and corrugated cardboard diverted from landfills each year. We target environmental efficiency at every stage of the process. We ensure that no harmful chemicals are released in the air or water. In fact, carbon dioxide produced during fermentation is collected and reused in the carbonation process. Spent grains are sold to local farmers for livestock feed or fertilizer. It's important to reduce, reuse, and recycle at every job and at every level. Several laws and regulations govern the Molson Vancouver Brewery. We operate under strict environmental permits, and any non-compliance to these may have a negative impact on our brewery. We currently have a very good relationship with the City of Vancouver, and we would not like to jeopardize that. Good manufacturing practices, or GMPS, as they are commonly called in the food products industry, are a regulatory requirement of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. They require all persons working in the food production areas, such as the bottle shop, brew house, and warehouse, to exercise good personal hygiene habits. In today's world, one always has to be aware of the possibility of terrorism. Be aware of your surroundings and immediately report any unfamiliar individuals or packages to your supervisor. As a new and inexperienced worker, you are at a greater risk for injury on the job. You need to know the hazards you may face and how to protect yourselves and your colleagues. Health and safety legislation is in place to guide management and workers to keep the workplace safe. Your Joint Health and Safety Committee is an excellent resource. Identification of workplace hazards and immediate reporting to your supervisor is your biggest contribution to a culture of safety in your workplace. The intent of this program is to provide you with the basic information needed to start your job in the brewery. It is important that you fully participate in all workplace-specific orientations that your supervisor or health and safety department provides.